brevis is sometimes described as the first interosseous volaris. The adductor pollicus obliquus (adductor obliquus pollicis) arises by several slips from the capitate bone, the bases of the second and third metacarpals, the intercarpal ligaments, and the sheath of the tendon of the flexor carpi radialis. From this origin the greater number of fibres pass obliquely downward and converge to a tendon, which, uniting with the tendons of the medial portion of the flexor pollicis brevis and the transverse part of the adductor, is inserted into the ulnar side of the base of the first phalanx of the thumb, a sesamoid bone being present in the tendon. A considerable fasciculus, however, passes more obliquely beneath the tendon of the flexor pollicis longus to join the lateral portion of the flexor brevis and the abductor pollicis brevis. The adductor pollicis transversus (adductor transversus pollicis) is the most deeply seated of this group of muscles. It is of a triangular form arising by a broad base from the lower two-thirds of the volar surface of the third metacarpal bone. The fibres converge, to be inserted with the medial part of the flexor pollicis brevis and the adductor pollicis obliquus into the ulnar side of the base of the first phalanx of the thumb. Variations. The abductor pollicis brevis is often divided into an outer and an inner part. Accessory slips from the tendon of the abductor pollicis longus or palmaris longus, more rarely from the extensor carpi radialis longus, from the styloid process or opponens pollicis, or from the skin over the thenar eminence. The deep head of the flexor pollicis brevis may be absent or enlarged. The two adductors vary in their relative extent and in the closeness of their connection. The adductor obliquus may receive a slip from the transverse metacarpal ligament. Nerves. The abductor brevis, opponens, and lateral head of the flexor pollicis brevis are supplied by the 6th and 7th cervical nerves through the median nerve, the medial head of the flexor brevis, and the adductor by the 8th cervical through the ulnar nerve. Actions. The abductor pollicis brevis draws the thumb forward in a plane at right angles to that of the palm of the hand. The adductor pollicis is the opponent of this muscle, and approximates the thumb to the palm. The opponens pollicis flexes the metacarpal bone, i.e., draws it medialward over the palm. The flexor pollicis brevis flexes and adducts the proximal phalanx. 2. The medial volar muscles. Palmaris brevis, abductor digiti quinti, flexor digiti quinti brevis, opponens digiti quinti. The palmaris brevis is a thin quadrilateral muscle, placed beneath the integument of the ulnar side of the hand. It arises by tendinous fasciculi from the transverse carpal ligament and palmar aponeurosis. The fleshy fibres are inserted into the skin on the ulnar border of the palm of the hand. The abductor digiti quinti, abductor minimi digiti, is situated on the ulnar border of the palm of the hand. It arises from the pisiform bone and from the tendon of the flexor carpi ulnaris, and ends in a flat tendon, which divides into two slips. One is inserted into the ulnar side of the base of the first phalanx of the little finger, the other into the ulnar border of the aponeurosis of the extensor digiti quinti proprius. The flexor digiti quinti brevis, flexor brevis minimi digiti, lies on the same plane as the preceding muscle, on its radial side. It arises from the convex surface of the hamulus of the hamate bone, and the volar surface of the transverse carpal ligament, and is inserted into the ulnar side of the base of the first phalanx of the little finger. It is separated from the abductor, at its origin, by the deep branches of the ulnar artery and nerve. This muscle is sometimes wanting. The abductor is then, usually, of large size. The opponens digiti quinti, opponens minimi digiti, is of a triangular form, and placed immediately beneath the preceding muscles. It arises from the convexity of the hamulus of the hamate bone and contiguous portion of the transverse carpal ligament. It is inserted into the whole length of the metacarpal bone of the little finger, along its ulnar margin. Variations. The palmaris brevis varies greatly in size. The abductor digiti quinti may be divided into 2 or 3 slips, or united with the flexor digiti quinti brevis. Accessory head from the tendon of the flexor carpi ulnaris, the transverse carpal ligament, the fascia of the forearm or the tendon of the palmaris longus. A portion of the muscle may insert into the metacarpal or separate slips of the pissimetacarpus, pissionzinatus, or the pisci annularis muscle may exist. Nerves. All the muscles of this group are supplied by the 8th cervical nerve through the ulnar nerve. Actions. The abductor and flexor digiti quinti brevis abduct the little finger from the ring finger and assist in flexing the proximal phalanx. The opponens digiti quinti draws forward the 5th metacarpal bone, so as to deepen the hollow of the palm. The palmaris brevis corrugates the skin on the ulnar side of the palm. 3. The intermediate muscles. Lumbricalis, interossei. The lumbricalis are 4 small fleshy fasciculi associated with the tendons of the flexor digitorum profundus. The first and second arise from the radial sides and volar surfaces of the tendons of the index and middle fingers respectively. The third from the contiguous sides of the tendons of the middle and ring fingers, and the fourth from the contiguous sides of the tendons of the ring and little fingers. Each passes to the radial side of the corresponding finger, and opposite the metacarpophalangeal articulation is inserted into the tendinous expansion of the extensor digitorum communis covering the dorsal aspect of the finger. Variations. The lumbricalis vary in number from 2 to 5 or 6, and there is considerable variation in insertions. The interossei are so named from occupying the intervals between the metacarpal bones, and are divided into 2 sets, a dorsal and a volar. The interossei dorsalis, dorsal interossei, are 4 in number and occupy the intervals between the metacarpal bones. They are bipeniform muscles, each arising by 2 heads from the adjacent sides of the metacarpal bones, but more extensively from the metacarpal bone of the finger into which the muscle is inserted. They are inserted into the bases of the first phalanges and into the aponeuroses of the tendons of the extensor digitorum communis. Between the double origin of each of these muscles is a narrow triangular interval. Through the first of these the radial artery passes. Through each of the other 3 a perforating branch from the deep volar arch is transmitted. The first, or abductor indicis, is larger than the others. It is flat, triangular in form, and arises by 2 heads, separated by a fibrous arch for the passage of the radial artery from the dorsum to the palm of the hand. The lateral head arises from the proximal half of the ulnar border of the first metacarpal bone. The medial head, from almost the entire length of the radial border of the second metacarpal bone. The tendon is inserted into the radial side of the index finger. The second and third are inserted into the middle finger, the former into its radial, the latter into its ulnar side. The fourth is inserted into the ulnar side of the ring finger. The interossei volaris, palmar interossei, 3 in number, are smaller than the interossei dorsalis, and placed upon the volar surfaces of the metacarpal bones, rather than between them. Each arises from the entire length of the metacarpal bone of one finger, and is inserted into the side of the base of the first phalanx and aponeurotic expansion of the extensor communis tendon to the same finger. The first arises from the ulnar side of the second metacarpal bone, and is inserted into the same side of the first phalanx of the index finger. The second arises from the radial side of the fourth metacarpal bone, and is inserted into the same side of the ring finger. The third arises from the radial side of the fifth metacarpal bone, and is inserted into the same side of the little finger. From this account it may be seen that each finger is provided with 2 interossei, with the exception of the little finger, in which the abductor takes the place of one of the pair. As already mentioned, the medial head of the flexor pollicis brevis is sometimes described as the interosseus volaris primus. Nerves. The 2 lateral lumbricalis are supplied by the 6th and 7th cervical nerves. Through the 3rd and 4th digital branches of the median nerve, the 2 medial lumbricalis and all the interossei are supplied by the 8th cervical nerve, through the deep palmar branch of the ulnar nerve. The 3rd lumbricalis frequently receives a twig from the median. Actions. The interossei volaris adduct the fingers to an imaginary line drawn longitudinally through the centre of the middle finger, and the interossei dorsalis abduct the fingers from that line. In addition to this, the interossei, in conjunction with the lumbricalis, flex the first phalanges at the metacarpophalangeal joints, and extend the 2nd and 3rd phalanges in consequence of their insertions into the expansions of the extensor tendons. The extensor digitorum communis is believed to act almost entirely on the first phalanges. End of section number 48.